Good morning and welcome to the Pathways Coordination Gathering. We are so glad to be with you this morning. My name is Jo Ann Deasy. I'm the Director of Institutional Initiatives at the Association of Theological Schools, and I lead the coordination work at ATS. And in partnership with the staff at ATS and the Interest Center for Theological Schools, I'd like to welcome you all to this fourth of our gatherings of grantees for the first round of the Pathways for Tomorrow initiative. It is always such a pleasure to see you all in person and to feel the energy and the excitement of the work that you are all doing. There are over 325 attendees with us, almost 30 presenters and coordination staff members and people from supporting organizations. You have a wide community supporting you in this work. You represent 100 Phase 2 and Phase 3 grantees from the first round of the Pathways Initiative. Some of you have been with us from the beginning. Pathways was launched in 2021 to help theological schools strengthen and sustain their institutional capacities to prepare and support pastoral leaders for Christian churches. You hear in that purpose two goals for this initiative: to increase the capacity of graduate theological schools to prepare and support pastoral and lay leaders for congregations, and the call to create sustainable models to support these efforts. After 4 years into this grant, you have learned a lot, and we've been learning right along with you. You've been doing research, listening to constituents, launching new programs, working on new financial models, developing new partnerships and collaborations. You've been evaluating, pivoting, reevaluating, discovering what are the core purposes you want to carry forward and how you will sustain them. As your grants have matured, most, if not all of you, are actually moving into new phases of your grant work right now. These grants are not projects that you can sprint through, though some of you tried. They're not a 100-meter dash where you go out strong and use up all your energy in the first few seconds or the first few months or year. Grant work is more like a long-distance race, or maybe more like a relay race. Grant work is like a race where you might be passing the baton from one person to another, sometimes intentionally, sometimes as the world transitions around you, and your grant is transitioning and being passed from one senior leader to another, one project director to another, from one office to another as you integrate your work into the life of the school. Perhaps for you, grant work is not quite like a relay race, but maybe it feels like a triathlon. You're swimming first, and then you're transitioning to bicycling, and then you start running, each of them requiring different equipment, different skill sets. You're moving from entrepreneurial startups to programs designed for endurance, from experiments on the margins to programs integrated that integrate the best of what you've been learning. From grant-funded work to self-sustaining models, in a few cases, reimagining this work in light of new grant possibilities. You're all in moments of transition, in the midst of institutions in transition, in collaboration with partners in transition, in a religious landscape that is constantly changing, in a world that is also transitioning in various ways. In the midst of such a race, as you move from one phase to the next, it's important for you to keep your eyes on the prize. If you could put up the next slide. Thank you. For our theme verse, we call upon us all to remember these words from the Apostle Paul that serve as a reminder that in our work we keep our eyes on the prize. From Philippians 3:12-14. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Jesus Christ. May this be a few days where you keep your eyes on the prize and where you are encouraged and supported as you press on towards that goal. Now, we would not be in this race without the support of Lilly Endowment. We continue to be grateful for their vision, for their support, how they are with us for this long, enduring race. And so at this time, I would like to invite Tito Madrazo forward to bring some words of greeting from Lilly Endowment.
Well, Jo Ann did a beautiful job of reminding us all of the big picture and the vision of the Pathways for Tomorrow initiative. So I'm just going to do something a little bit smaller and tell you about what I was doing last week. Last week, I spent 6 days in the town of Wise, Virginia. It's in the far western corner of Virginia, right across the state line from Kentucky. And I was there with a whole group of teenagers from the congregation where I worship, and we were serving with an organization called the Appalachia Service Project. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, but they have a goal of sharing the love of God with people in Appalachia by helping to make their homes warmer, drier, safer. This is not an infomercial for ASP, but they are a great organization. So I was there with a group of teenagers, and before we left, they gave us some paperwork, and they asked us to indicate on the paperwork our skill level when it came to a variety of tasks that they might assign to us, as well as, tasks where we didn't feel as though we were highly competent or comfortable, or simply things that we were less interested in doing. Now, this was the first work week for ASP in Wise, Virginia, so we actually didn't get our jobs assigned to us until the very last minute. And it turns out that our jobs involved replacing a shower unit with a handicapped shower and doing some prep work on the roof that was going to have a metal roof laid on it. And I thought, that's not bad. I came in, I felt pretty good about a variety of my skills. The two things I said I wasn't interested in doing really were finishing drywall, just not very good at it, or working with insulation because it's just gross and itchy. A lot of other things I learned along the way. There were some advantages growing up in a resource-constrained immigrant family. I didn't know that there were such things as professional plumbers or carpenters when I was growing up. I simply worked alongside my dad and learned a lot of skills and almost all Spanish profanity during those moments. But let me show you what we started off with. The original shower that was in place when we arrived, it was a small corner unit. There wasn't enough room for a handicapped stool in it. And so we took it out and we thought, this is going to be easy. We're going to come back in with the new unit. And it was not easy. The plumbing wasn't in the right place. The drain hole in the floor wasn't in the right place. The size of the wall in which we were going to install this unit wasn't standard. We pulled up the flooring and realized that all the flooring needed to come out. And we got to the subflooring and realized that all the subflooring needed to come out. And then we looked at the joists underneath and realized that the joists needed additional reinforcement and support. And if you've ever been under a home, when you get into the joists, you get into insulation, right? And when you get non-standard sizes of equipment, you end up having to do additional framing, and that means you have to put in drywall. So all along the way, we had this dawning realization on the first couple of the days that we were there that we might have bitten off more than we could chew, that there were more issues to consider and to address than we had originally planned for, that the plan we had in mind didn't quite fit the circumstances we were facing and required us to pivot along the way. 5 days seems like a long time, but even though the days were long for us, the week flew by. And as we kept getting deeper and deeper into the week, still with a lot of things to do on our list, I realized that I had to let go of some of my perfectionism sometimes, that as much as I wanted to supervise all of the things that we were doing along the way, I really had to trust some teenagers to do some things that I wasn't sure they could do, and that they also were not sure that they could do. We had to deal with some transitions. Some of the teenagers that were helping me on the early days, as we got into things like drywall and insulation, realized they would prefer to work on the roof. And again, we wanted to give them the opportunity to serve however they felt God was leading them to serve. And so some of the kids that I was really counting on went somewhere else. And I had to bring new kids into the work and explain what it was that we were doing and continue to remind myself that it wasn't just about accomplishing the work. It was about building capacity in young people who are going to be called to carry out all kinds of work as God continued to direct their lives in the future. And especially when we got to the drywall and the insulation, I didn't just get to do the things that I was good at. Eventually, I also had to do some things where I questioned my own abilities. And I had to do some things that I just really didn't want to do. Now, hopefully, you've been hearing some of the echoes in my story and my experience for your own Pathways projects. All of you here are now somewhere between 3 and 4 years into implementing a project. And there have probably been many times when the days have felt long, and yet the years have flown by. We've all gathered here and done this kind of thing now several times. I don't know about you all, but I have more gray hair than when we started. Just this last week, I just prepared and signed a letter responding to a report for the first Pathways project that had come to its completion. They had sent in a final report, spent all their money, achieved many of their outcomes along the way, and I was saying to them, well done, in my response letter. But that doesn't mean that they were done with the work that their Pathways grant had supported. And even beyond that, they weren't done with the calling of God on their institution to continue to live out their vocation as theological educators, preparing pastoral leaders for congregations. They were still pressing on in new directions as they are going to continue to build on what they accomplished through their Pathways grant. And eventually, in the not too distant future, that will be true of all of you in this room. So over this next year especially, my hope is that you're pressing on in the work of your grant and doing all of the important things that are going to enable you to press on beyond your grant period as well. And many of those things may be a lot like the things that I was doing with a group of teenagers in Virginia last week. When you first began to implement your Pathways grants, you might have realized that you had bitten off more than you could chew. There were more issues to consider and to address than you had originally understood. And some of you took some extra time there at the beginning to get that structural work done. But it meant that your project took a little bit longer to get off the ground. And now you're in a season where you're trying to get through a few more successful iterations of your offerings or your financial modeling or whatever it is you're working on so that you can sell it to leadership and to other donors as you approach the end of your grant period. Now, some of you recognized that there was some structural work to be done, but it seemed a little bit too overwhelming at the moment, and you pushed ahead with your program to get it off the ground and running. But now, At this point in your project, if you're really going to get it ingrained in the larger work of your school, you need to attend to some of those things if you're going to be able to press on. And I know that a lot of you can relate to the idea of having to pivot because the plan you had in mind didn't quite fit the circumstances you were facing. I know this because I have read and approved your budget revision requests over the last couple of years. Your ideas have grown sharper and stronger. And now you need to press on to implement them fully within these next 2 years. Some of you have recognized over time that you've had to widen the circle of trust and let other people step up to the challenge of making your project work. You've had to trust some people, even when you weren't totally sure that they were going to be able to pull things off. Even when they weren't totally sure they were going to be able to pull things off. And yet, you have to press on when it comes to involving the wider circle of stakeholders in your institutions if your project is really going to be stitched into the fabric of your mission. And I hate to break this to you, but it may be time for you to do some of the stuff that you're not very good at. Right?
Yeah.
For some of us, launching a new educational program has felt life-giving. We've loved getting something off the ground and going and that creative work. But maybe it's time to fundraise. Maybe it's time to market and sell the vision differently. Maybe it's time for those of you who've been working out on the periphery to bring the faculty into this in a new way. Because if things are going to live long term, everyone has to catch the vision. They have to have capacity built for carrying out this work that you see as a pivotal part of the mission of your school now and into the future. I'm not saying you have to be good at it. I'm not saying you have to like it. But there may be things that God is calling you and your team to in this season that are absolutely necessary. And I do believe this, that when you step out in faith, especially to do those things that you don't want to do or where you're unsure of yourself, that those are new opportunities to meet God in the midst of the work. Many of you have dealt with transitions in your schools. It's happened at the executive level. It's happened at the project leadership level. And for those of you that haven't dealt with them, they may still happen before you get to the end of your grant periods. Some really competent people have moved on. And now you have to stop and introduce what you're doing to somebody else to get them up to speed and to count on them. And in the midst of those particular challenges, I would encourage you to remember that your grant isn't just about accomplishing the work, but also about building capacity in the people who are going to carry these efforts and the wider mission of theological education into the future. All of us are always only interims in our positions. There have been other leaders before us. There will be other leaders after us. But I think that one of the great legacies of the Pathways for Tomorrow initiative will ultimately be the cultivation of a new generation of leaders who began their work in this field, tinkering with the educational and financial models of theological education and reaching out to make it more affordable, more accessible, more ecclesial, and more contextually appropriate for more people. For some of you in this room, all you have ever known is innovation. And that will be a great gift to this wider ecology of theological education for many years to come. So, wherever you find yourselves at this particular moment in time, please know that my colleagues and I are incredibly grateful for the hard work that you have done to arrive at this point, for the grace that has carried you this far, and for the grace that will lead you home as you continue to press on in this work to which each of us has been called. Because you're not just here because of a leadership role you hold in your school. You're not just here because of other duties as assigned. You are here because you have been called for such a time as this, for this particular work. And we have been blessed by your efforts to date and those efforts that we will all make collectively as we press on toward the prize because of the calling. Thank you.
I am mindful that I also entered this work similar to you, that all I have done at ATS since I've come into my position 11 years ago is work with initiatives. And the great blessing of working with all of you in the midst of innovation and iteration. For me, that's what theological education is, and I love to be able to accompany you with through that. So we're going to talk about the goals that we have for this gathering. So these goals were developed in conversation with coordination staff and Lilly staff, but also very much so the Pathways Advisory Committee, and having listened to the evaluations that you have submitted to us over the years. So our goals for this gathering, as you've already probably inferred, were helping grantees keep their eyes on the prize and move towards these next phases of your work. Providing opportunities for sharing current learnings and collaborative problem solving among grantees. Sharing the impact Pathways is having on the landscape of theological education. And we'll do that primarily through a panel that will be hosted tomorrow morning by staff from the coordination programs at ATS and the Entrust Center, where we'll give you a chance to hear our perspective on the themes we see emerging within your grants and their impact on the broader ecology of our work. And finally, to begin structuring peer learning among grantees for 2025 and 2026. Coordination fundamentally is about building and supporting a peer learning community among grantees that you might walk together through this process. It's a real emphasis that we heard. Last event, we spent a lot of time within teams, but we were told that you really want to talk to one another and gain insight and wisdom and hear new ideas. And so we've really structured this conference with a lot of different ways for you to talk with your peers. Each morning following the opening plenary, we'll have peer learning sessions. They've all been designed with a focus on peer-to-peer conversations. The first sessions, non-degree programs, all the way through calculating the financial viability of programs, those first 5 today and tomorrow, which will be different ones, but those 2 sets of sessions are all led by staff, consultants, and they're designed to balance content with peer-to-peer conversation. We then move on to a set of 4 that are much more completely peer-centered. So you see navigating transitions, peer learning for senior leaders, CEOs, and CAOs. So for that session, it is really just designed for CEOs and CAOs, but it's designed for them to gather and talk about the impact Pathways is having on their roles. And it'll be facilitated by Frank Yamada, Executive Director at ATS, and Heather Hartung, Director of Accrediting, and our newly named Senior Director of Programs and Initiatives at ATS. And tomorrow there'll be a similar session in that slot, but it will be designed for project directors and facilitated by Christopher Tay, Director of Student Research and Initiative Management, who's been shepherding the project director community and drop-ins over the last 2 years, I think for now, and his colleague Tay Moss, who's a tech entrepreneur and innovative ministry leader working with the Toronto United Church Council. And then these final three, forming ministers for diverse contexts, enrollment and recruitment strategies, and sustaining collaborations. These are just truly peer conversations. They're being led by peers from ATS schools who will facilitate conversations today and tomorrow on these same topics, designed for you to explore how together you might increase your capacities in each of these areas. You'll talk about the questions you're asking, the challenges you're facing, the resources that you might bring to this work together. That will be the focus of today's conversation. And then tomorrow, you'll do some work designing peer learning opportunities that will help connect you with existing resources and overcome gaps to expand your capacity. And whatever comes out of these last three sessions will inform work that the coordination teams at ATS and the Entrust Center will do in the next few months to develop peer programming for the next academic year. In addition to those peer learning sessions, we have a few other special sessions I just want to highlight this morning. One is navigating course obstacles. So again, we do listen and we try to respond to the evaluation that you gave us. And we heard that you want to hear from one another about the obstacles that you're facing in your work. It could be roadblocks that you're facing where you had to go in a completely different direction. It might be a speed bump that just slowed you down. It might be a large obstacle you had to climb over, but we wanted to hear from one another. And so you'll have the opportunity to choose from one of these three sessions. And we're grateful for those representatives from schools that were willing to tell their brief stories of obstacles and give you time to discuss those at table conversations with one another. We also heard that you don't want to just talk about the struggles, but you want to acknowledge the gifts that you have brought to this work, the superpowers that you have, that you've really leveraged as you've been implementing your grants. And one of the things that we talked about as an advisory committee, all of you have superpowers, gifts, strengths you are bringing to this work. And sometimes in the midst of the obstacles, you can forget that. So we want to give you an opportunity to spend some time just thinking together and talking about and celebrating your superpowers. And we have put you into teams, groups where there'll be 2 or 3 teams per table. And you'll be able to talk together with teams that have some similarities to yours and some difference. That is the beauty of ATS. So we'll put you in teams and give you a chance to talk about your superpowers. We will, of course, also have team time. It would not be a Pathways gathering without an opportunity for you to sit down with your team. We have one scheduled today after lunch and one near the end of the day tomorrow. We will provide framing questions. We've assigned you to various rooms. You can find those in a lot of different places, but they're on some stanchions that are out in the hallway. We did give you space throughout the hotel so that you might find a quieter space. We've often done team times in a big room like this, and it has been difficult, as some of you, I see nods. So we tried to spread you out a little bit more and give you space for that. We provided you with framing questions. But as you hopefully all know, now that this is our 4th gathering, use team time the way that you need to use it. The framing questions are there if those are helpful for you. But if there's something else you need to accomplish as a team, please do that. If there's a space that works better for you, please do that. This is a lovely hotel with a lot of spaces within the lobby where you could gather as a team. If you need to rest and you are more morning people, if you would rather talk late at night, if you would rather do it over lunch or dinner, we just would like you to take an hour with your team today and tomorrow. It's in your schedule, but if your team needs to flex, if somebody didn't get in until 2 a.m. and they really need a rest, please take that. This is supposed to be for you and useful for you. I don't know if back there you can find the slide with the list of all the peer learning sessions. That's where we're headed next. I do want to say that we have tried to put a little bit more space in the schedule, and the evenings are free. We will have closing plenaries at about 4:30 each day to wrap the day up. You'll have a break, a dinner buffet for you to enjoy with one another. But we heard, and we probably feel with you, the need for some rest and some expansive space to connect, to think, to spend time alone or with companions or playing, whatever you need. But we know how hard all of you have been working this past year, and we pray that you'll take that moment in ways that will sustain you. You're headed to peer learning sessions. We'll keep this up so you can find one. Remember, first come, first serve, so head where you would like. After lunch, you'll come back to this area for lunch buffet. The lunch will be followed by team time. There will not be a lot of leading you through this, so we'll try to mark during when it's time to move on, but you'll head into team time after lunch and then into the navigating course obstacles sessions before you come back to this room for us to conclude the day. So again, so glad to be with you. Enjoy a short break, 20-minute break, and we'll see you in your peer learning sessions in about 20 minutes. Thank you.